Hi, my name is Alex Wilson, and today I'm going to be presenting to you all my final application and project for the Geography 476 Web GIS final. So let's get into it. I will start to share my screen with you all. All right, so we're just going to jump right up to the front. And yeah, so my project is the Alberta Orphaned Well Identifier. Again, through the University of North Dakota, Geography 476, and my name is Alex Wilson. Generally speaking, the high-level intent of this project is to look at the 3,402 wells designated as orphaned within the province of Alberta, posing risks to the environment with no responsible party. That's what makes them orphans. If there's no responsible party, these wells are everywhere within the province. Nobody's looking at them. Some are very close to population centers, others are in the middle of nowhere. By ponds, sloughs, forests, you name it, those wells are probably there. The study area, the scope of this application is within the Canadian province of Alberta. Oil and gas is very important to the province, with oil and gas representing $60.7 billion Canadian per year, which is approximately 29% of the provincial GDP, or 6% of the national GDP. Generally speaking, wells will go through a three-stage life cycle. That's a drilling and completion portion of these wells. If the wells show significant volumes of economic hydrocarbons, they will go into the production phase. The wells in the production phase can last for upwards of 60, 70 years. Some wells completed back in the 50s are still online, or it could just be a matter of hours. It really depends. After the well is done production, it's ready to be abandoned, where you essentially pour concrete into the same perforations and exposures to the reservoir that the well was producing hydrocarbons through. You're going to dump cement into there to block off and plug off those holes. On surface, you're going to cut that casing string off to 1 to 2 meters below the final contour elevation, and you're going to fill it back on top with dirt and return the well to its natural state. That's considered an abandonment. The problem here is that the production to abandonment phase, there's a big gap, and sometimes there's a big limbo between these two stages of the life cycle, where wells sometimes will last in there for years or decades, just because it's expensive to abandon a well, and it's much easier just to kind of leave it offline than to address the problem. On occasion, companies will go bankrupt because they simply have so many wells that they need to abandon. The costs exceed their assets, and then therefore these companies go belly up, thus turning these wells into orphans and handing them over to the Alberta government to go figure out. This graph here on the right, I grabbed from an Alberta government website, and you can see the number of wells drilled per year. While it's obviously far below the peak now of somewhere around 2,200 wells per year, or wells in that specific time frame in that month, you can still see drilling activity still is prevalent in Alberta, with your monthly numbers kind of sitting around that mid 400 range. So here's a little diagram of what a well looks like when it's abandoned. The intent of this diagram is just to show everybody it's not a very simple process to abandon a well. It gets very expensive if that well starts to give you problems as well. These two charts here are from the OWA, the Orphaned Well Association, which is a subset of the Alberta Energy Regulator. The purpose of the OWA is to abandon wells, facilities, and pipelines within the province that are designated as orphaned. Now, it's very encouraging to see that the funding for the OWA has increased exponentially over the years. However, as has the orphaned well inventory over the years. So it's important that the OWA can continue this trend of at least funding to match the amount of wells that they will be receiving. If anything, you would hope that they can start to exceed the amount of the funding would exceed proportionately the amount of wells that they're receiving, so they can start to push this number down. Those of you who aren't heavily involved in the oil and gas industry, you might not have heard, but the price of oil has dropped to negative $38 a barrel. It's since gotten better, but that was only a couple of weeks ago. So there's expectations that there's going to be many, many orphaned wells coming because companies simply can't afford to produce this commodity, which was worth something a couple months ago, and now is worth essentially close to nothing. So the method, how did I do all this? So I went to the Orphaned Well Association's website. From there, I got a list. It was essentially a 2-column list of a well UWI and a well license number. While it's useful information, purely from the counting perspective, there's 3,400 of them. It really doesn't give you much conceptualization of the orphaned wells beyond that. So what I did is I used Excel. I dumped everything from the OWA into Excel, used Excel to piggyback or to feed into a program called AccuMap, which is a government database of wells. I created a table union within AccuMap, linking wells based off of their UWI. I then tied that to production data and other pertinent information such as lat long and other data for these wells, re-exported it to Excel, and then use Excel to upload all that information back into ArcGIS Online. I will be getting into this application in a moment, so I'm not going to dwell here too long, but this is the opening screen for the app. So what's the application creation and intent? The intent is twofold. The first and primary goal is to increase the general public awareness of the orphaned wells within the province. I want everyone to see and to understand how many wells that there are and how close they are to their children, to their friends, to their family, in their neighborhoods. Because until you can actually put it on the map, it just kind of seems like something that's like, oh, yeah, that's a problem, but at least it's not in my backyard. Using this, I'm hoping to show everybody that yes, in fact, it could very well be in your backyard. This is a very pertinent and very relevant problem in Alberta, but it's really not limited just to this province. Saskatchewan is producing oil, Manitoba is producing oil, BC is, and then the states, states like Montana, North Dakota, Texas, Oklahoma. This is a universal problem, honestly, within the industry. The second intent of this application is opening up the possibility for potential well reactivation. Some technical-minded people who are in the industry, I want to create this platform not just for the awareness of your average Joes, but for people who are in this. This is their job. This is what they do. So I want to show production data, when the well was last online, and other pertinent information to potentially get these companies to say, hey, look, that looks like a decent asset. It might work into our portfolio quite nicely. Doing that's the ultimate win-win for everybody because the company's getting a cheap asset. The government has one less well they're now financially responsible to abandon, and the people around the area win because it's one company is now taking responsibility for the environmental repercussions and consequences that may come from this well. The company's now going to be held responsible and it will get dealt with. I do have some interesting results. There's much more in the paper if you guys do want to read that. However, I think it's very interesting to see the note trends. This is all this table I constructed, pulling from the annual reports from the Orphaned Well Association. We can see their annual increase in funding here. And again, has the same as that exponential incline, which is exciting to see. The cost per well abandonment, we can see that number is dropping exponentially, which is awesome to see as well. They're getting efficiencies by producing or abandoning even more wells. And see, here's your decommissions executed. And there's a well inventory. We can see that's increasing as well. And it's to be frank, it's expected to increase a lot, in my opinion, in the coming years. We do have two histograms I've provided for this slide. The average 3 months production prior to the well being shut in. We can see that here with pretty much 95% of the wells producing next to nothing before they were abandoned. And over here to the right, we can see the histogram of the last production date. Data like this is valuable in these histograms and these tables, but again, until you're able to graphically represent it and show it through a platform such as GIS, it's really has the potential, at least in my opinion, to fall onto deaf ears. And I think that's why we all are in GIS, because we recognize that and we want to be able to display this information graphically. So the discussion, the OWA funding has increased on a per well basis from 8.9 million in 2014 to 18.5 million in 2018. That's awesome. That's really encouraging to see. However, assuming $72,000 per well abandonment, and that's a real number, that's what I pulled off of the most recent abandonments, the expected cost to abandon the remaining wells alone, that 3,402 currently in their inventory, is $244 million. That's before we get into all the wells that are going to be coming down the pipe through all these, unfortunately, bankruptcies that are expected to happen. So the point of that is there's much, much more work to be done and much more funding required. Thus, the awareness of the OWA needs to stay high. It does appear to be gaining momentum and addressing the orphan well problem in Alberta, but there's still lots of work to go and to come. So let's jump right into this web application. So this web application can be used both on a computer platform or through a mobile device. Personally, I prefer using it on a computer because you can have more control on the data and it's formatted a little nicer, in my opinion. However, it does work on the phone as well. I did include a significant README, just kind of walks everybody through what they're seeing and what's going on. It explains all the layers, it explains the units, and it it really helps ensure that the user is receiving the message that I intend for them to receive. The very first page that we come up to is the homepage. On this, we have the Alberta Township grid system. Most people are familiar with this grid system within the province. It's just a 6x6 grid overlaying everything. It does exist in North Dakota as well and other states, excuse me. However, it's very prevalently used in Western Canada. So the first layer I have here is the orphaned well type and location. Looking at this map, you can see how many wells there are. Here's where those 3,400 wells are on the map. I also broke them out into well types. Not every well is just an oil well. You have gas wells, water injection wells, disposal wells, shale gas wells, coal bed methane wells, that's at CBM, etc. So it is useful to see what type of well it is. If you click on any random location, the pop-up brings up the OWA, where you can click that link and you can learn more. So quickly moving through, there's a type and location. We also have the orphaned wells, number of years idle, where your oldest wells, your wells with the highest risk, generally speaking, are going to be the darker, redder color. And your newer wells, such as all these down here by Calgary, will be your lighter color. I think this is a very valuable layer for both the, I guess, your average Joe to understand, like, oh, look, these wells over here, like, look at this little cluster. Let's zoom in here. This little cluster by, I guess, by the middle sandhills. Look how old these wells are. it's pretty bad. It shows in this one, the last production date was October 30th, 1998. So we will zoom back out. And now we'll go into the cumulative oil production. This is going to be a map layer that's more geared towards your oil and gas professional. Or if you click on this, it can show you what this well has produced cumulatively throughout its life. Some of these wells, I'll zoom out further so you can see it, haven't really produced much. Like, this is in cubic meters. 1 cubic meter is 6.29 barrels. So everything in green has produced between 0 to 10,000 cubes of fluid. Your bigger circles, redder circles, those are going to be your heavier producers, such as these wells up here, which have produced 115,000 cubes minimum. If you click any one of them, you can just see a nice little picture of an oil well and its cumulative oil production. We've also done that for the past 3 months. Again, same concept. Here's your cubic meters, 3-month average oil production before shut-in in cubic meters per day. This one here, I guess, was making a lot. Let's see. Click a random one here. So I guess this one was making nothing. That's a picture of an abandoned well. Again, I did change the pop-ups on every single one, just to make it a little more fun for the user. I did the same exact thing for gas. You'll notice here the unit is E3M3, which is 1,000 cubic meters of gas. And again, if you click any one of them, here's the 3-month cumulative gas production index. So it made 477. This is a picture. I really like this one because it does show you pretty much the most realistic look at what these orphaned wells would look like. It's literally just going to be a piece of pipe sticking up in the middle of like a cow pasture. Maybe if you're lucky, some cattle guards and some signs around it, but you get into full spectrum. So you really don't know. And honestly, the government, I don't think they know what's out there either for these wells. One thing I really like with this map, and I believe it's a very powerful feature for raising that awareness, is I overlaid the riding list, riding districts over the province. Those of you watching this video from the States, a riding is essentially a congressional district where your MLA representative is the Canadian equivalent to your congressman. So if you click this, sorry, I guess you got to turn off this layer. If you do click this district, it shows, okay, this is the Lesser Slave Lake riding. And I wrote a little thing that says, who's my MLA? So find your MLA by clicking the flag below and how to contact them. So we'll click that link and we'll follow it. So here's a directory of all the MLAs within the province of Alberta. So if you just do a Control F, and then we say Lesser Slave Lake, looks like your representative is Mr. Pat Roon from the UCP. So the idea of this application is you would use that. You say, okay, this is my representative. Here's his address. This is how you get a hold of this guy. And then you tell him, like, hey, look, man, look at all these wells that are in this district. I want these abandoned now. Why aren't you doing anything about it? That's kind of the whole point, is like, I want pressure to be put on these politicians and like, let's hold them accountable. And you can even drill down using this additional well info layer. You can say, hey, this is my farm. This 102, 7 of 11, 78 of 4 well, I want this abandoned. This is a risk. So that's my intent of this. I'm going to pull off that Alberta ridings list. So I do have one additional layer. It's called Orphaned Well Additional Info. And again, the intent of this layer is for kind of your more technically inclined person, I did include a lot more relevant information for somebody such as myself, I'm a production engineer for an oil company. It says, here's your zone, here's your cumulative oil and gas, here's how deep the well is, how this is measured depth and true vertical depth, very technical terms. And I also linked it to an Excel table. I took my Excel table and uploaded it into Google Drive, made that entire thing accessible to the public. And it's just going to populate here. Now, I left it kind of in this format. If you're coming this far into it, you're going to be able to find a well. Here's your UWI, and that's what you'd use to filter. And as you can see here, you can see there's a ton of information. But a lot of this is going to be very, very technically oriented, and that's why I chose to exclude it from the app, because your general member of the public doesn't need to see this kind of stuff. But I like having it available should somebody be curious enough to go dive in. The entire point is like awareness. We want to raise awareness, and we want to provide as much information as possible. So this is my application. I'm excited to be presenting this in front of all of you. I'm excited to see everybody else's applications. My plan is I will be sending this to the AER, which is the Alberta Energy Regulator, to try to help them with the OWA. And I really hope that this does have real world implications. One feature of this app that I forgot to talk about is wells near a point. You can say, I want to know all the wells that are around me. And let's say you live in this area here by Cold Lake. Tell me all about all the orphaned wells in the Bonnyville region within 100 kilometers of my current location. And it looks like there's 43 of them. Here's your little pin marker. And it's going to show you, these are all the wells. These are the 43 wells. If you click on any of those, say, okay, this one, give me some information, directions, and how do I get there? So it's another neat little feature. If you want to say, how do we get to this location? This is how you would do it. The radius does expand and contract within 500 kilometers, and it's a neat little feature. Looks like it's 44 minutes with current traffic. So again, I do hope you guys have enjoyed this app. It's fun to make. It's fun to make something that has real world applicability. And I'm looking forward to everyone's feedback. And yeah, hope you have a great day. Thanks.